Yo yo yo, welcome to my new video series, Legato for Noobs. Let's just start with a quick definition. The term comes from Italian and means tied together. We tend to think of legato as sounding smooth though. It's when you don't have the attack of your guitar pick in between notes in order to break one sound from the last one. So the sound of this technique is very different compared to something like economy picking or alternate picking. How's this series going to work? Well, each video is going to go through one page of content that I've previously created. We're going to learn the exercises contained on that page and then practice them together. When it comes to the practicing, I'm going to play each one at a slow tempo, 50%, and then 75%, and then a faster tempo at 100% speed. All of them, we're going to get up to 100 beats a minute, which isn't mad fast, but obviously if you want to speed them up some more, you can do that in your own time. Will you be a master at legato after completing this series? Probably not. We're just going to establish the basics, but we're going to establish them well and we're going to practice them so that they become ingrained in your guitar technique overall. So let's just start by defining what a pull-off is. Now, of the two things that we're going to be practicing today, the pull-off is slightly easier to achieve and to understand than the hammer-on is. So what is a pull-off? Well, a pull-off is a way of getting between two or more notes on the guitar. And the action of doing a pull-off is actually quite easy to understand. Let's start by pulling off between fret 3 on the high E and open high E. Pulling off between fretted notes and open strings is much easier than pulling off between fretted notes, so we'll start here. We're going to start by playing fret 3 on the high E string with finger number 1. I'm going to play that fretted note as normal. Then I'm going to pull my first finger down towards the floor until it isn't on the string anymore, like this. And you can hear the sound of the open high E. And that is achieved not by a separate pick stroke, but by the action of your finger, your first finger in this case, leaving the string. There aren't two pick notes, it's not this. Watch again. Right, now the first exercise that we're going to do, we're going to play that same thing with each one of our 4 fretting hand fingers, one after the other. So it's going to be finger 1, then 2, 3, then 4. I'm keeping the technique the same for each one of the fingers. Here's another little point of caution. Try to make sure that when you do your pull off, you keep your finger close to the string. Don't go like this. You don't want to do that because you're going to waste energy getting your finger back to the fret in order to play the next note. So try and make sure that you keep your fingers as close to the strings as possible. After we've done this on the high E string, we're simply going to do the same thing on the B. Then the G. Then the D. And that really is it. We're going to repeat that a couple of times, then we'll stop and it'll speed up, then we'll stop and it'll speed up, and so on and so forth. 1, 2, 3, 4. Finger 1, 2, 3, 4. B string. Then the G string. D. Back to the beginning, back to the E. E. 3rd finger, 4th finger, B string. G, then the D, and then it's going to stop, and then we're going to start again but faster. 2, 3, 4, and D string, finger 1, 2, 3, 4, G, D, and we're going to do all that again, back to the E, B, G, D, okay, and it's going to get faster, 2, 3, 4. Now it's time to move on to exercise 1B. So for the first time here, we're going to be pulling off between 2 fretted notes. And this is really tricky, so make sure you take your time. The first thing we're going to do is play fret number 3 on the high E string with a downstroke of our guitar pick, like this. Now at the same time, notice how I've got my first finger pressed into fret number 2. So I've got my second finger on fret number 3 and I've got my first finger on fret number 2. And they're both pressed down at the same time. So before I do that pick stroke, I've got both of those fingers in place. Then I'm going to play fret 3 and then pull my second finger down towards the floor until it isn't on the string anymore with a nice firm pull like this. Now make sure here that you don't start picking your finger up away from the string kind of towards the camera. You need to make sure that you pull your finger down towards the floor. But even more importantly, you've got to make sure that your first finger doesn't move off the second fret. And that's the real challenge, because you will want to do this and pull both fingers down towards the floor. But we want to make sure that that first finger stays on fret 2 so that we're pulling off from fret 3 to fret 2 like this. So we're going to do this once, then we're going to leave a 1 beat rest. 1 and 2, 3 and 4. And we're going to repeat that 8 times. On the second repeat, we're going to use fingers 1 and 3 instead of 1 and 2. And on the third repeat, we're going to use fingers 1 and 4. Now, you're never going to be doing a pull-off like that, and I'm going to mention this a little bit more in the next example, because, well, that wouldn't really make sense to do it that way. You're probably going to use finger 1 and 2 or 1 and 3, but you will be using your little finger if you're going to pull off with a stretch between frets. And that's obviously more difficult again. What we're going to do initially is practice it without a stretch, get your head around the fundamental movement, and then later on in this kind of course, we're going to put stretches between the frets. Okay, fingers 1 and 2. 3, 4. 1 and 2. 3 and 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 4. Right, 1 and 3. 1 and 2. 3 and 4. Remember, nice strong pull down towards the floor, but don't take your first finger away from fret 2. Keep going. Fingers 1 and 4 coming up. Okay, 1 and 4. Keep going. 1 and 2. 3 and 4. 1 and 2. 4. 1 and 2. 3 and 4. Right, back to the beginning. And a little bit faster now. Fingers 1 and 2. 1 and 2, 3 and 4. Fingers 1 and 3. And then 1 and 4 coming up. 1 and 4. Keep going. Keep going. Back to 1 and 2, but faster. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, 1 and 3. 1 and 4. Nearly there. Last one, and stop. Okay, let's move on to exercise number 2. Now in this one, for the first time, we're going to have a hammer on and a pull off. This is quite a tricky thing to get your head around, so make sure that you take your time with this, and if you need to pause the video and go away and practice it for yourself, if you need to re-watch the video in order to have me explain it another couple of times, then just do whatever you need to do in order for it to make the most sense to you. So I'm going to start by playing fret 2 on the high E string with finger number 1, and I'm going to play this normally with a pick stroke. Then I'm going to hammer on to fret number 3 with my second finger. Now let's just talk a little bit about the action of a hammer on. Now basically this is exactly what it says on the tin. You're going to use the force of the tip of your finger hitting a string on one of the guitar's frets in order to produce the sound of a pitch. But in reality, this is actually quite difficult to do because you've got to have a fair bit of finger strength in order to make it happen kind of efficiently and correctly and clearly. What you don't want to do though is to fall into this trap. There is just something we just need to be careful of here before we continue, and that's the idea of the word hammer on. Now, the image that that's going to create in your mind is somebody swinging a sledgehammer, and that's a little bit misleading because this is more about the correct application of force than it is force itself. Now, that might not initially make sense, but it will make a little bit more sense once I've continued talking about this. You need to make sure that you do the hammer on in the right way rather than just do it as hard as possible. Because if you just do it as hard as possible and you're doing all of your hammer-ons right from the very beginning, just really, really, really hard with your fretting hand fingers, you're going to find that there's going to be fatigue that's going to enter your hand as you do this. And you don't want that, because if that does happen, you're just not going to play as well. Just going to interrupt myself here and just say, please don't forget to subscribe to the 60 Seconds to Shred YouTube channel. Like this video, leave me a comment, it all helps with the algorithm. Right, let me just go back to that kind of physical explanation of how you do it. Just bear what I've just said in mind though. So when you do your hammer on, you're going to make sure that you use the tip of your finger. Don't use the flat of your finger here. You've got to make sure that you use your tip of your finger, because if you're using the tip, there's less surface area, so you're kind of applying more pressure as a result of there being less surface area. So you're not going to have to put as much force behind it in order to be able to make this sound the way that you'll want it to sound. Also, make sure that your hammer-on lands just behind the fret wire here. It's a tiny bit easier to get a note to sound like a note on the guitar here than it is in the middle of the fret. So I'm going to play fret 2 on the high E with my pick stroke, and then I'm going to hammer on to fret number 3 with my second finger. Now you're going to need to practice this. Just doing it a few times. I'm trying to not do this with my finger like I was describing before. It's not this action. You need to keep your fingers close to the strings. At first you might find that it just doesn't sound like anything. But the more you do it, the stronger your finger will get and the more it will start sounding like fret number 3. Now, the next bit, this is really tricky. Lots of people struggle with this idea. We're now going to pull off back to fret number 2. So I'm going to do my hammer on, then I'm going to pull my second finger down towards the floor until it isn't on the string anymore, like this. And then you can hear, because you've got the action of that second finger leaving the string with that downwards motion, the sound of fret 2. What your first finger will want to do though is exit stage left and just come off the guitar like that at the same time that your second finger does. And you've got to try to, in your mind, counteract that possible movement by telling your first finger to stay where it is. That is easier said than done, and you will need to do some practice in order to complete those 2 actions. The hammer on and then the pull off. Just watch one more time. Now exercise 2 requires you to do this. You're going to play that hammer on that we've just discussed twice on the high E, then on the B, then the G, then the D, and then we go back to the beginning and start again. But there's a twist. The second time round, you're going to use fingers 1 and 3 instead of 1 and 2. So you're going to do it twice on the high E, twice on the B, twice on the G, twice on the D. Then we're going to go back to the beginning and start again. But again, there's another twist. You're now going to use fingers 1 and 4. Then the B, G, D. Now, why are we doing this with the 3 kind of pairs of fingers? Pairs 1 and 2, and then 1 and 3, and then 1 and 4. Well, it's just get used to completing this action with different pairs of fingers. But you're very unlikely to play a hammer-on pull-off with fingers 1 and 4 like that, with the frets right one next to each other. It's not completely unlikely, but it's very unlikely. But the point is that if you want to do a hammer-on pull-off from frets 5 to 8, for example, which is that's much more likely, there's a stretch between the fretted notes there. So we do it here because there's no stretch, and so you can kind of practice the action of doing finger 1, hammering onto to finger 4, and then pulling off with finger 4 back to finger 1, rather than having to deal with that and the added kind of difficulty of a stretch between frets as well. Right, let's get practicing. Let's give this a go. Okay, so fingers 1 and 2 first. And again. Then on the B string. G. D. And then we're going to go back to the high E with fingers 1 and 3. B string. Just make sure you're using fingers 1 and 3. G. D. And then back to the start, fingers 1 and 4. I know this is a tricky one here, but just bear with it. B string. G. D. And then stop there, back to the start, fingers 1 and 2, 3, 4, bit faster. B. Be thinking about where your finger's going to land when you do that hammer on. Back to the beginning again, 1 and 3. B string. G. D. And then fingers 1 and 4. B. B, G, D. Okay, it's going to get faster. 1, 2, 3, 4. Right, okay, it's time to move on to exercise number 3. Now, assuming that you've got your head around that hammer-on pull-off kind of technique that we did in the last one, this is actually pretty straightforward. You're going to do fret 5 on the high E string with finger number 1, then hammer on to 7 with finger 3, then do the same thing on the B string, then the G, then the D, back to the G, then the B. This is what I call a cycle because it kind of loops on itself. So when you get to the end, it loops seamlessly back to the beginning and starts again. 1, 2, 3, 4. Fingers 1 and 3. B, G, D, G, back to B, back to the beginning, E, B, G, D, G, B, and stop, bit faster, 2, 3, 4, E, B, G, D, G, B, and again, E, B, G, D, G, B. Back to the beginning, 3, 4, E, B. Right, let's get to exercise number 4. This is easily the most difficult one that we've looked at so far because of the structures between some of the fretted notes. The thing that makes it kind of easy to understand but not necessarily to complete is the fact that you're going to play the first new note on each new string with the same finger, that being finger number 1. So we're going to start by playing fret 5 high E with a pick stroke, and then hammering on to fret 8 with the little finger. Now that's the bit that's tricky, and you might need to practice that in isolation in order to be able to fully kind of complete it and make it sound the way that you want it to sound. Then we're going to leave a 1 beat gap, do the same thing on the B. Then on the G, you're going to do frets 5 and 7 with fingers 1 and 3. Then on the D, the same, A, the same, and then on the low E string, frets 5 and 8, like it was on the B and the high E. So all the way through, it's going to go 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 1 and 2, 3 and 4. Right, let's give it a go. 3, 4, and. Exercise 5 is the same, but without the rests. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and... I have left a 2-beat gap at the end of the second bar in order to give you time to repeat back to the beginning. 1, 2, 3, 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3, 4. A little faster. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3, 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3, 4. Faster again. 2, 3, 4. And that's it for this video. We're going to do some more of this moving forwards. Please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the 60 Seconds of Shred YouTube channel because it all helps with the algorithm.